Hey guys, it's Bruce. I'm a noob, and today I'm reviewing Border Model BT-003. That's their Panzer IV-F. It's a 3-in-1 kit, so you can build a regular F. You can build an F with the Panzer armor on the front of the hull and the turret, and you can build a F upgraded with Scherzen, so the side plates on the side of the tank. This is their second Panzer IV kit. They came up with the Panzer IV Late G early in 2019. That was very well received. Overall, a few minor issues with some of the marking options, but other than that, most people seem to really like it. So I was really excited to see this come out. I'm a big fan of the short-barreled Panzer IVs, and you know, this isn't much of a stretch because, of course, that G was just simply a later evolution of the F. The F was the first of kind of the second generation of Panzer IVs. It was built from May 41 until February 42. 470 of them were built mostly by Krupp, who had built all of the older Model A to E Panzer IVs. But this was the first iteration of the Panzer IV, where Vomag and Nibelungenwerk were actually brought in to help manufacture Panzer IVs to get the numbers up. It was the last, as I said, Panzer IV with the short L24 75mm gun, and the F represented a number of improvements over the Ausf E. First and foremost, the armor on the front of the hull and the superstructure in the turret was upgraded to 50mm. The earlier models of the Panzer IV were found to be very wanting in terms of armor protection on the front, and 50 mils was a big improvement at the time. The fact that they later went on and put Vorpanzer on the D, E, and F, and then even further upgraded the armor on the G, H, and J, spoke to the fact that even 50mm really wasn't adequate to some of the anti-tank guns and other enemy tanks that the Panzer IV was facing. It was the first of the Panzer IVs to have the 40cm tracks. All of the earlier ones had 38cm tracks. And that led to a couple of other changes to the drive train, to the suspension I should say. You have a dished drive sprocket, because of course with a wider track the old drive sprockets weren't wide enough. Wider rubber tires were produced for the road wheels, and finally a sort of a simplified welded tubular idler wheel, because the idlers on the old Panzer IV A to E were very complex, and a nice clean welded idler was much easier to produce. On the back of the tank, which you can't see in this picture, the auxiliary muffler, which was a very long thin muffler on top of the main one on the earlier models, was changed, and that auxiliary muffler, starting with the F, was just a simple sort of square shape mounted to the left of the main muffler. The driver's visor and the machine gun mount in the hull were upgraded a little bit over the E. They don't look radically different, but they were a slight improvement. And finally, the hatches on the side of the turret, where it became a two-piece, as was being used by that point on the Panzer III. Of course, A to E Panzer IVs all had the big one-piece turret hatch that swung forward. So those are the major changes to the F. It really, like I said, then set the stage for all of the later developments for the Ausf G, H, and J. Let's dig into the sprues, and then we'll take a look at the instructions, and I'll give you my thoughts on the kit. So first we're going to start off with the hull tub. This is a one-piece molding, slide molded obviously, because you can see they've actually got the sponson, the sides of the superstructure there, molded right onto the hull in one piece, and these louvers on the side as well are molded right on there. Those are usually multiple parts in a kit like a Dragon kit. They've also got the mounting points for the return rollers mounted on, and the mounting points for the bump stops there on the suspension. So a pretty complicated little piece of molding. I gotta say, it looks quite nice. Really good detail on the bottom, and should go together pretty clean. So that is the hull tub. Before we get too much farther into the sprues, I'll just mention that all of the plastic in this kit is exactly the same as in their late G kit, with 3 exceptions. There are 3 extra sprues added, and we'll get to those in a minute. We're going to go through all of the main sprues that build up the hull and build up the superstructure and the turret. And again, most of those we're going to be using parts from the G, but you'll see a lot of parts on the sprues actually are not going to be used because they'll be replaced by new sprues specific to this kit. So the C sprue, we've got the upper glacis in the back of the hull, we've got the rear of the engine compartment. You can see here we've got some add-on armor, which would be specific to a G or an early H. But in this case, we're not going to use those. We've got the recuperator housing with the aerial deflector. Again, that's specific to a G. And we've got our Kugelblende cover there. We've got the end of the long 75 gun, don't need that. And we've got some tools, and you'll see, I'll try to get in here as close as I can. They do have molded on tool clamps. They're not hollow, so you could either drill those out or put some black wash in there or something to highlight the middle. And it should look pretty good. Certainly a step up from some of the blob clamps you get on some of the Dragon Smart kits, and certainly on the older Tamiya kits. There's our long 75. We're not going to need that. S-hooks again. We've got a 4-piece barrel cleaning rod, and we'll talk about that a little later on because that causes some concern. And there's our wire cutters. Actually look quite nice, although they seem to be wanting in the way of handles for the clamps. So anyway, looks nice and crisp, though. Very, very nice fine filigree molding on those. The D sprue is actually quite a small little sprue. We've got some more add-on armor, which we're not going to need. We do have molded in one piece the 4 little covers that go on the back of each fender, and they can flip up and cover up the engine vents on the side of the engine compartment, and then the splash deflector, bullet deflector around the cupola. We do have a turret bin. You'll notice actually it has 2 holes molded in the back of it. These holes are specific to the version with the shirts in, so these would have been used on the G kit as well. So if you're building the the F, that's not an E. If you're building the F with the shirts in, you're going to want to use this turret bin, but we'll see there's another one later on. And this is Sprue E now. So you can see obviously we've got our superstructure top. They've got the bullet splash guard there molded right into it, which is nice. You don't have to glue down separate little fine pieces. We've got the front of the superstructure there and the radio antenna trough. The rest of this sprue is pretty much all shirts in, and I'm going to point out a couple things. First and foremost, these are what are called Series 1 shirts and rails, so these don't have the little triangular teeth in them, which would make them Series 2. These are the ones that go on the side of the hull and hold on the top of the hull shirts in. We've then got our hull shirts and brackets there. They look really nice and crisp, some more there. Now, turret shirts in. This style of infill for the brackets for the turret shirts in would have been applied to shirts in if it was installed in a factory. There were 3 factories, as I mentioned, making the F. The main one was Krupp, which had produced all the other previous Panzer IVs. But then Vomag and Nibelungenwerk also started producing F1s. This type of infill is specific to either Krupp or Vomag. So that tells us then that this tank we're trying to build would have been retrofitted with Schertzen in the factory, not in the field, because when Schertzen was first released in 1943, it was ordered that tanks already in service would be upgraded by field workshops, and the support brackets for field applied Schertzen did not have these braces inside them. So we're saying that this is going to be a factory updated Panzer IV-F, and there are some so whats that come with that, and we'll talk about those a bit later when we get to the marking options. You can see we've got our turret Schertzen doors there, and here's the side of the turret Schertzen. Again, you can see here we've actually got 3 bolts, and it might be kind of hard to see, but I'll try to zoom in there. There are 3 bolts which correspond to a bracket attaching this to the side of the turret. 3 bolts also tells us that this was factory applied. The earlier versions and the field applied versions had 2 bolts. So this is telling us this is kind of a, you know, after the initial factory application of Schertzen, and certainly not a field application of Schertzen. Over here we've got another G part. That's just the front hull armor bolted on, which would be a very late G kind of thing. So that is that sprue. Over here, actually it broke off. We have somewhere, there we go, the back of the turret Schertzen, and that's actually nice and thin. I got to say, I really am impressed with how thin that is. It's very flexy. It's got the the grounding strip along the bottom there. And you can see here the 2 pins that actually go into the back of the turret bin if you're doing the Schertzen version. So nice and clean and very thin and crisp. Gotta like that. So now we'll talk about Sprue F. There are two of these, and of course, as is usually the case, suspension parts in a lot of cases usually get doubled up in kits. So across the top, we've actually got spare tracks. These are obviously T-34 tracks. So if you're doing a Russian front vehicle, you can drape these all over as you see fit, or if you have reference photos that kind of show you where they should go, that's awesome. We've got some bits for the cupola here. It looks like division ports. They would go like that. We've got our suspension springs here for the bogies. So you can see that it's not like a single monolithic one-piece bogie like you'd get in a Tamiya kit, but it's not quite one of those articulated super kit Dragon ones. So it's in between, like a Dragon Smart kit, I guess you'd say. We've got some Jerry's there, that's great. We've got our idler adjustment housing. There's the bogie covers. We've got our welded idler wheel, which we talked about. And oh, there we go. We've got a bucket. We've got a bucket. And in fact, there are two of these, so you get two buckets. So that's all good. The ends for our tow cables. They do give us a piece of copper wire, which is awesome because that really rigid Dragon steel wire sucks to try to bend it. So copper is much better. And then we've got the backs of our road wheels. You can see the rubber's molded on, but the detail looks really nice and crisp. And we even got spare road wheels without rubber on them. So if you wanted to do partially burned out tank, or you wanted to have a spare with no rubber, I don't know what you do with that, because I don't think they could really apply the rubber in the field, but that's all good. It looks nice and crisp. So that is Sprue F. So another double sprue now, this is H, and you can see we're using Lincoln length tracks. If you like Lincoln length, that's awesome. A lot less fiddly than Magic tracks, but you can get that nice sag in there that you can't get with DS or vinyl. So good stuff, lots of individual links, and I imagine there'll be a few spares as well that you can drape all over the vehicle if you want. We've got our drive wheel, and you can see the dished sort of concave aspect of the drive wheel like we talked about. The F was the first Panzer IV that had that. Final drives look nice. You can see we've got the armored cover here for the final drive, and that's really nicely molded because of course you've got bolts all the way around it, and that is a bit challenging to mold. Dragon sometimes makes you put those on individually, which is just awesome. Return rollers look pretty good, and now the fronts of the road wheels, there is lettering molded on there, and I'm going to go on a limb and assume it actually spells Continental properly, and it doesn't say Continental with a U. We'll get in there and take a look when we do the build. Hopefully I don't have to scrape off parts of a bunch of U's. So that's Sprue H. So Sprue J, we've got our auxiliary muffler. So this is the little square auxiliary muffler that replaced the long skinny tubular one on the earlier models. We've got our front and rear mudguards. They're nice and crisply molded. There's a bit of detail on the back too, which is nice, although you can see there's some ejector pin marks there. If you're into that, you can fill those in. We've got our muffler. As a lot of manufacturers do now, it's molded in several slide molded pieces, which is awesome, except the main part in the middle is in two pieces. So, and they actually molded on the actual exhaust outtake there. So gonna have to sand that down, and you're gonna have to work around the actual exhaust pipe itself, and try not to sand that down accidentally. But again, some really nice fine parts on here. We've got our jack. Looks really cool. They've got actually the brackets, the clamps for the jack are actually molded. Those look really, really delicate. So hopefully I won't snap those when I take them off the sprues. We've got shovels, axes. Now these don't have clamps on them, and I'm going to double check and see, in fact, if they give you the PE clamps, because there is a bit of PE with this kit. We've got an alternate 4-part barrel cleaning rod, and again I'll talk about why that's a problem in a bit. But depending on the manufacturer, the brush could be mounted at the top or mounted at the bottom, and the clamps were slightly different. So that's good to see they've counted for that, but again it's going to pose a problem potentially. We've got the underside of the rear of the hull there. So yeah, looking pretty good. We've got our tow hooks. Yeah, that's looking like a pretty solid bit of molding there. I'm really impressed. Again, that was one comment with the G kit, that Border really did a good job with their molding. So the K kit, we're not going to use a lot of this because, as you can tell, this is a lot of G gun stuff. The front of the turret with only one of the vision ports. That was a G thing. The F had both of them in the front, just like all the earlier models. Here's our two-piece hatches for the sides of the turret. They look really nice and crisp, a nice little detail there. You can get in there and chip it and dry brush it and make it look really sharp. Gun breech, I don't think we're going to need that. And then we've got the top of the turret bin. And yeah, there you go. Ejection pin marks. Those ones aren't bad, but these are going to be a bugger if you want to have the turret bin open. And then we've got some cupola bits here. Now this is a G cupola, and in fact it's a late G cupola, the up armored version that later was used on the H and the J. So we will not be, or we should not be using this at all. One piece hatch, again, that's a late G, H and J thing. We won't be using that. And there's the other, that looks like part of the recuperator. Yeah, okay, that's the breech actually. So we're not going to be using that. So now on to the first of the kit specific sprues. This is the N sprue. So as you would imagine, we've got gun parts. So we've got, again, recuperator bits. We've got the part that the end of the barrel fits into there. Here's our turret front, and as I mentioned, you can see we've got both vision ports intact there. We've got our antenna deflector, aerial deflector there, and that this was the last tank that used this type of it, the G, and had a different type, and then they dropped it all together on the H and the J. There's our short little gun barrel. So you can see slide molded, got a nice hollow end on it there, so that's good. Driver and radio operator hatches with the signal ports still in them, that's good. These appear to be turret sides, at least one turret side because they're identical, and they're upside down too, there you go. So they've announced they are coming out with an earlier G, and this makes total sense now because the F had the vision ports on both sides of the turret. Just like all the previous models, A to E. But then during G production, they dropped the vision port in the side of the turret to simplify production. So this part is not going to be used on this kit. It will be used on their upcoming early G. So there you go, sneak peek there. There's our two-piece cupola hatch. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Our mantlet. This is up armor. So in fact, here you can see this is part of the Vorpanzer assembly. So we've got the turret cheek armor there, we've got extra armor for the front of the hull. This wasn't like the later stuff that was actually bolted or welded directly onto the front of the superstructure. In fact, it had standoff, it stood off, and then this is the frame here, if you can see that, that gets installed in front of this piece, or behind this piece, to keep it standing off from the front of the hull. So kind of spaced armor, so that's pretty cool. So this is the other new sprue that comes with it. It's the P sprue, and you can see here, in fact, now we have a different superstructure front, so we're not going to use apparently that older one. Here's the other side of the turret, and you can see it does have the vision port in it. Here's the G one that doesn't have it, that'll be used on another kit again. Vision ports for the cupola, open and closed. And there's our cupola. So we talked earlier about the up armored late G cupola, and this is in fact the regular F and early G cupola. So we'll be using that one, and there's the base for it, and presumably the vision ports all fit in around that. So again, nice crisp molding, looks really sharp. I'm thinking these are the handles for the vision slits, and in which case that's awesome because it's nice and detailed, and I haven't even seen that on a Dragon kit. So well done, Border Models. And then here's our turret bin that doesn't have the holes in the back, so this is the one you want to use with the non-Schertzen option. So that looks really cool. Lots of nice bolt detail around there, and the little mounting mounting plate. That's very sharp. Hopefully you can make out that detail. Forgot all about the L sprue. So this is the fenders, obviously, and whether you like it or not, they've actually molded all of the little holes in these fenders for all of the tools and the jack and all that stuff. So if you don't want to mount the tools exactly the way that they have them in the kit, you're going to have to figure out a way to try to fill some of that in and maintain the anti-skid texture. So good luck with that. I much prefer the Dragon way of doing it, where you just get the bare fenders, and you just cut the little pins off the tools and you can put them where you want them. Or worst case, you can drill up from the bottom. Now there is anti-skid on the bottom, speaking of which is actually pretty cool. I like that a lot. If you wanted to do like a seriously deformed fender and have it bent right up, you'd actually be able to see that, that anti-skid. One drawback to these, for whatever reason, rather than have you glue on little brackets, if you wanted to do the shirtsen, these are the little brackets that support the hull shirtsen on the bottom, they've molded them on. So you're going to have to go along and nip those all off and sand them smooth. Not a big deal, but you know, I would rather have the clips, I think, separate, and you could have the option of putting them on or not. But very nice molding though, and awesome, awesome anti-skid. Just too bad they molded the tool holes on there. So we'll take a look at the photo etch now. Two pieces of photo etch. There's this one which has all of the PE version of the louver covers, the vent covers. If you want to use those individually, they're nice and thin and should look pretty awesome. And then we've got a few little brackets here. I'll have to check what those are for when we go through the instructions. And then a separate little piece here, if you can make that out. Hopefully you can. That is your track. Oh, is that your track tool? No, maybe. No, it almost looks like a ladder. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see what that's for, and a few other little tidbits there. So not a lot of PE in the kit. That'll make people happy. You do have, however, brass shirtsen. That's awesome because they bend really well. They're nice and thin. You've got, again, this is Series 1 shirtsen, so you've got the cutouts for the hooks off the upper hooks, and then the little ones that come off the fenders. So, well done, Border. I probably won't build the shirtsen version, but hey, I've got a really nice set of Series 1 shirtsen now. So that is awesome. Now, we're going to get to the one thing about this kit that might be a deal breaker for me. The turret. So this is a new turret they molded just for this kit. It is not the same as the G turret. So here's the turret from the G kit. You can see they've actually molded the sides right onto it. This is the turret for the new F kit. And they did that. Obviously, we saw there were two different variations of the side pieces, one with and one without vision ports, which gives them flexibility for a G. The problem with this is that they put in the up-armored rear portion of the turret. You can maybe hopefully see there's a little step there. That was a late G thing. That was absolutely never, never, never on an F. So if you want this kit to be historically accurate, you're going to have to figure out how to make the back part of the turret drop about, I don't know, 1/4 millimeter to take that step out without sanding off, say, the splash guard and the signal port. So that's going to take some thought. I don't know how I'm going to figure that out. By way of comparison, this is Dragon's F1, and you can see there's absolutely no step there, right? It's clean. It's a two-piece hull roof, but it's just a bend. It's not a step from the extra thickness of armor on the back. So that's what an F1 turret should look like. So sorry, Border, you dropped the ball on that, and I don't know. I'm going to give that some thought about how we're going to fix that. So let's take a look at the instructions. Fairly quickly, we've got our typical sprue map on the front. Again, these are the extra sprues that come with this kit, plus the incorrect new turret, our historical info. We assemble our extra stuff first, which is kind of funny, so our bucket and our tracks and stuff. We then get into the hull. We're putting our vent covers on, either the one-piece plastic or the PE bits, putting the sides on the engine compartment, putting the vision ports on the sides of the hull. And so now we're going to put all the stuff on the left side of the hull. We're going to put on the jack block and the brake vent armored cover, the side of the engine compartment, and one of our two 4-piece cleaning rods. This is completely wrong, Border. Another way you drop the ball on this kit. The L24 gun, the cleaning rod had 2 pieces because it's a short gun. The 4-piece didn't come into play until the long gun went on to the F2 and then later called the G. They went to the 4-piece then. There is no 2-piece cleaning rod in this kit, so either you have to hack a couple of sections off of that, which is going to look like crap, or you're going to have to find a 2-piece barrel cleaning rod in your spares bin, maybe order aftermarket, I don't know, but that's wrong. So strike 2, Border, sorry about that. Bottom of the hull next in step 5, pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated there because they've molded on a lot of the bits that would normally be separate pieces on, say, a Dragon kit. Step 6 now, we're going to get into our final drives and our return rollers. Step 7, our Bogie assembly. So semi-articulated, you can see that the spring piece goes onto the Bogie mounting assembly, and then there's a little cover that goes on. So again, like a Dragon Smart kit. Be careful though, These two diagrams are backwards. So you can see here there's that little square end on the Bogie assembly. That should be pointing forwards. You can see here it directs you up to the right side of the tank. You would have to flip this around, and in fact then the square front would be pointing to the back. So just make sure you reverse those. Keep, as it shows in the diagram, keep the square ends of the leaf springs pointing forward. Rear of the engine compartment and the hull go on next. That builds up pretty clean. Again, our two-part center portion of the muffler there we talked about with the exhaust pipe molded on, so be careful there. Armored smoke dispenser cover. This was new to the F1 as well. So that goes on the back there. Our drive wheels, our idlers, and the little bottom of the toe point go on to the back there. Toe point itself, the rest of it goes on. Now we put our fenders on, and we put all the tools on. And we talked about the holes being pre-molded in the tops of the fenders. Not the end of the world, but there are pictures of Panzer IVs that have different tool configurations, and they show us here. So for example, this little, where'd it go? There's a little L-shaped thing right there. That's actually the track tool that used to be mounted over on the left side of the superstructure on older models. I've seen pictures on early Fs with that on the left fender, and there are no holes on the left fender for it, and if you put it on the left fender, you'll have to fill the holes on the right fender, so not great. Our idler adjuster tool, this is on the rear of the right fender. I've seen Fs with that mounted on the side of the engine compartment. So if you do that, again, you're going to have to fill those holes without destroying the anti-skid. So fenders go on, our spare tracks go on the front. Pretty small step there, step 13. 14, driver and radio operator hatches go on with the signal ports, and then superstructure top gets mounted on the vehicle. And 14 continues over here rather than being a new step. And we're doing our upper glacis with our transmission access covers. The main transmission cover itself is actually molded on, which is unusual considering they made those separate. Not the end of the world anyway. Spare tracks go on the top. That and the type of brackets they're using here is a later thing, so this was a G thing. So if you're doing the Schertzen version, I would say go for it. But if you're doing a regular F, or maybe even the Panzer F, I probably wouldn't put those spare tracks, at least with those mounting brackets on the upper glacis. We've got some PE here, we've got our ladder. Oh, that was the L-shaped thing, yeah, it was the ladder. And we've got our Kugelwende and our driver's vision port there, front of the superstructure, and the upper glacis go on. Lincoln length tracks. I've never done Lincoln length tracks. I'm looking forward to it. I'm planning to assemble them, but leave a gap so I can get them off the model to paint. We'll see if that works or not. We've got our mud flaps now going on the back, and just on the left side, spare whole step unto itself. The right side now, mud flap, radio antenna trough, another step there, 18. That's most of the basic assembly. We're going to get into the Schertzen now, so only if you're building the Schertzen. We're going to put on our hull Schertzen upper mounting brackets and our rail on the left side and then on the right side. And then hang your individual Schertzen plates on that. So that's probably going to look pretty sharp if you're doing the Schertzen version. I'm not, but again, I've got spares now. I can do Schertzen on another tank if I want to. Turret, we've got the whole of the turret sides going on there, and again, that's the ones with the vision ports still in them because this is an F, not a G. Inside, there's a bit of detail there, so you could probably have those side vision ports popped open if you wanted to. Ventilator cover and all the little doodads go on to the outside of the turret. So that's looking pretty good. Same on the other side here. And now we've got our turret doors with there's a separate mounting frame in there, so that should be nice and crisp when that goes into the turret. Turret bin, so if you're using Schertzen, you do the one with the holes in the back. No Schertzen, no holes in the back. And now we get to our L24 gun. So this is all totally new, obviously, with this kit. And it looks fairly standard, like any, you get a two-piece recuperator there, and the housing goes on the front. Yeah, that's all good. It looks pretty straightforward. We've got some breech detail there and the guard and everything around the breech, so if you have your turret hatches open, at least there's something to kind of glimpse in through the hatches, so that's all good. Cupola is still part of 26 rather than being a separate step, doesn't matter. So cupola goes together on the top. That looks very straightforward, much less fiddly than, say, a Dragon cupola. Good on them. Schertzen, so these are these Schertzen brackets for the turret with the factory infill, not the no infill field applied ones. We have to cut some pins off there. Presumably there's some holes in the G kit that take those, because these would be the same as the G. Turret Schertzen goes on. turret shirts and doors. I guess you can either have a two-piece door, so you could have them open, or the one-piece molded door. If you're doing the Vorpanzer now, step 29, there's a couple little brackets that go on, and then your Vorpanzer plates go on the front of the turret and the sides. That's awesome. Assemble the hull and the turret, and then the last thing you're doing for the Vorpanzer version, this is that spacer piece and the spaced armor out in front of the superstructure. So that's it. 31 steps. Probably should have been about 34, but that's okay. So marking options, hopefully there's no catastrophic errors like there were in the G kit with a few of their options. First option is the 15th Panzer Division, so this is 8th Company of Panzer Regiment 8, part of the Afrika Korps, and they've got all the Ammo MiG colors as callouts and weathering products there from Ammo MiG as well. They're calling Sand Grau. I'm not familiar with that particular color. During the F production window, the Germans were using a scheme called Tropen 1, which was RAL 8000 and RAL 7008. So it was actually quite a dark kind of browny yellow sand color as the main color, and then there was kind of a secondary pretty kind of sandy gray as the accent color. If you ever see pictures of Tiger 131 at Bovington, that's the paint scheme. So to me, you would be safe putting Tropen 1 on this if it was an Afrika Korps vehicle, because that was developed specifically for Afrika Korps vehicles. Not long after, it was April 41, after Panzer Regiment 5 was the first armored unit to show up in Africa. So Tropen 1 maybe, or if you just want to do a Desert Tan, sure, whatever. By this point though, it wouldn't probably have been German Panzer Gray 721, overpainted like the earlier Afrika Korps tanks were. So you wouldn't have all that gray chipping stuff going on with this, potentially. You'd have some chipping, maybe an abrasion, but not that massive patches of gray showing through. Our next one is an unnamed unit, and it's just looks like Panzer Gray with winter whitewash over it. So have at it. Look at Panzermeister 36's awesome dirty winter camo video, because that would be really cool for this. Now, 803, this is from Panzer Regiment Grossdeutschland, part of the Grossdeutschland Infantry Division at Kursk. So this is the summer of 1943. This is the only Scherzen marking scheme they give you. I'm going to try to flash a picture up here if my friend Akira Takaguchi gives me permission to, because it's his picture. From what I can see in this photo, the Scherzen supports for the turret don't look like they have the infill in them. So that would tell me that, in fact, this was a field-applied Scherzen upgrade. And if you look really closely at the picture, you can see there's only 2 bolts. And 2 bolts either means field-applied or very early factory-applied, but the factory-applied Scherzen would have the infills in the turret Scherzen support brackets. So to me, based on that photo, 803, this would be a field-applied Scherzen upgrade. If you want to be accurate, then you would have to carve out all of those little upgrades, or even maybe bend your own new Scherzen brackets out of brass sheet or something like, or styrene, or well, styrene might be challenging, probably brass sheet, without the infills. And you're going to want to shave off the center bolt on the turret Scherzen, because it should only have 2 bolts. Otherwise, Panzer Regiment Grossdeutschland, Kursk, that would make a really sharp looking model as well. So I said I hope there wouldn't be any problems with the marking options for this kit. Here's a problem. So this is our first Vorpanzer option. This is number 377 from the 24th Panzer Division. So the Leaping Horseman symbol you may be familiar with, destroyed at Stalingrad. And I've talked to some of my friends on the Panzer IV reference group on Facebook, and as far as anybody's been able to tell me, there were no Panzer IV F1 Vorpanzers with 24 Panzer Division. So I'm sorry, wrong. If this was a D Vorpanzer, maybe you could get away with it. I'm not sure they had E's. I know there were E's with, I think it was Grossdeutschland, but no F's with 24 Panzer. So this is fiction. You could do the non-Vorpanzer version, just a regular F. No 24 Panzer Division Vorpanzer. I'm sorry. Last one. So this is probably the tank that's most famously represented in photography anyway. This is actually from a training unit in France in 1942. There's a famous photo of this lined up with a bunch of other tanks, including some Vorpanzers, I believe. What you can't see here, because they've got you putting the stupid spare tracks on the front, don't do that if you're building this tank, because the photos don't show spare tracks. What is painted on the front is the word Hansi. So they've named their tank Hansi, and there are no spare tracks on the front of the hull, so don't put those on there. But again, it's a Panzer replacement battalion, so probably never saw combat. It may have, maybe, but no one knows for sure. So if you want to do a Vorpanzer F1, this is the one to do, because there is photographic evidence that this tank existed, unlike, to the best of my knowledge, the one from 24 Panzer. So, what is my verdict of this kit? Very nicely molded. It looks like it'll be a very nice build. Andy's Hobby Headquarters actually has just put out a build video actually of this. Andy built this with some winter whitewash and stuff. I really want to like this kit. I really do. It's again nicely molded. I'm happy to see Border Model, another company, building affordable, well molded, fairly well engineered from the looks of it kits, especially Panzer IVs. But two things: the turret and the lack of a two-piece barrel cleaning rod, to me, are enough to say I don't recommend this kit if you want to build an F1. If you want to build a G, knock yourself out. Highly recommend the Border G kit. Based on reviews, I haven't built it yet myself. I do have it. But if you want to build an F1 and looking at that turret roof is not going to drive you nuts every time you glance over at it, get that. This is an amazing kit. This is an early Dragon Smart kit, not far off the original new tooling of the F2 that they came out with originally for the Smart Kit line. Get this kit. A lot more parts, but still it's a Smart Kit, so it's not ridiculous. Not a lot more parts than the Border kit, but it's historically accurate for the most part. There's no extra plate on the turret roof. You get a two-piece brush cleaning rod, and to the best of my knowledge, all the marking options are historically accurate. So recommend this one. And if you don't want to splurge for this and you don't want to build what, I don't know, whatever it is, 690 parts. If you want to build a simpler kit, there's an older Dragon F1 from back in the 90s that goes together like just about every other F kit, or Panzer IV kit for that matter, from the 90s. Not quite as refined as this, but still a solid little kit. And it's got DAC markings and everything, so you can make yourself happy with that. But Border, nice try. Thanks for coming out, guys. But I just cannot overlook on a you know, a newly tooled turret piece. They made the turret just for this kit, and they messed it up. And that is either, you know, pay historical advisors more money, or pay more historical advisors to give you dissenting opinions. I don't know what it is, but that's almost inexcusable on a brand new kit with a newly tooled turret and the brush cleaning rod. Yeah, well, you know, they've actually got it covered with a tarp there. I don't know if somebody saw the box art and said, that's wrong, and said the artist went back and painted over a aerial recognition flag to hide it, maybe, from viewers who would have picked that out and said, that's wrong. So, can't 100% recommend it. If you just want a nice build, go for it, right? It'll come out nice. But if you have any semblance of, you know, wanting historical accuracy, I'm sorry guys, I can't recommend the kit. This is Bruce. I'm a noob. Thanks so much for watching. I'll try to get more videos out sooner, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Please consider clicking like and clicking subscribe. And we'll be back shortly, hopefully before too long, and I might actually build something. We'll see. Thanks, guys. Bye.